For this particular lesson, we're going to need to make reference to this template to render the sphere in a relativistic space. Okay, we're going to use the master cube. We're going to use some principles of perspective, a line of sight, and we're going to draft a volume in a relativistic manner. We're going to design the page following this template, and then we're going to continue and render the sphere. Okay, we'll need this template, a kneaded eraser, and a charcoal pencil, and a large sheet of newsprint paper. Okay, so we're going to set the template aside and keep it there for reference. We'll also need a yardstick ruler. Okay, and here we go. So first of all, I'm going to establish the master cube, the front plane and the back plane, and establish the overall volume of the drawing and the space that the cube will appear in. Okay, the important thing is to keep everything nice and square to the page. And you want to draw nice and light, not too heavy, because this is just the design schematic for the rendering. Okay, so we have the outside perimeter done, and now I'm going to establish the back plane of the space. Okay, and I'm following the template and all the aspects of it. Okay, so there's the back plane, and you're to connect the corners of the back plane. And what we're establishing is the master cube here, and the master cube helps us visualize the overall space of the page that we're designing, that we're situating the volume in, and then the object. Right, so the master cube, here we have the space of the page, right, moving towards us. It gives us a little reference. Now what we do is we establish a line of sight, which is the perspective drawing aspect, and we're trying to keep everything nice and square. I will establish these vanishing points, okay? And so the next thing we do is we're going to draft this volume that the sphere is going to appear in. Okay, so the first thing we do is we draw this line here, which we're going to establish the height of that cube, that volume, right? So let's do that first, right? So we're going to situate it slightly off center of the page. Okay. And we're going to put it right about here, nice and square to the page, okay? And we're going to precisely intersect those vanishing points as we put in these vectors. And I'm hitting those vanishing points exact. There's a little bit of magic here. If we don't, things won't line up. Okay, so now there's a little bit of estimation that has to be done here. So since this volume is slightly off-center on the page, this distance will be a little shorter than that distance. So, and we're trying to establish a cube volume, right? So I'm estimating it right about here. Okay, and the right side right about here, right? And we join the opposite sides, right, with vectors to define the rest of the volume. Okay, and we're drawing nice and light, so as not to overpower the rendering in the end. Okay, and so here we have these two intersections in the back, and if everything works out right, it should all work out nice and parallel, and that establishes the fourth corner of the volume. Now, since we're going to situate that sphere into that square volume, we're going to locate the center axis. The sphere is a symmetrical object, so it makes it a little easier to locate into the volume. And okay, so this intersection and this intersection represents the center axis. Okay, and the next thing we do is we establish the volume of the sphere, right? So I'm going to go around the sphere visually. And this takes a little practice. Notice I'm swinging my whole arm nice and easy, right? You can see it's not perfect, but it's there to fix and correct. Okay, and so this establishes the dominant direction of your line work, right? And so here, as you can see, it looks pretty cool, as if it's like a hologram where the volume of that sphere appears within the cubic volume, right? Defining that sphere nicely. And you can go over this to kind of refine it a little bit. Okay, and so the next thing we do is we establish the light source, right? And the direction of the light source, okay? And what this does also is gives you the distance of the shadow area. And so where this visually, that light would create a transition area would be right around there, right? So the light side, the soft edge, shadow core, reflected light, and then cast shadow, right? Right in there. Okay, so here we have the schematic for our drawing, and we're going to progress a little bit here by beginning to work in the background, sort of on the substrate that the sphere is situated on. And remember that the page is the light, right? And we're using the value of our charcoal to harness the light, okay? And we're going to draw up to the edge of the object, right? Maintaining the dominant direction of the space, right? The space is moving towards us, right? That's the dominant direction. And you can kind of see the full dimension of the drawing at this point. It's starting to appear, right? So now this is where the meticulous part of the drawing starts, where we have to, well, it's all meticulous in a sense, but this part where we begin to add the values takes a lot of work. And you know, as long as your drawing is designed properly and everything is in place, you're going to spend a lot of time adding in the value. So it's important that the drawing is designed well first before you start spending all the time adding the value. Okay, and so we're going to work light to dark so as not to overcommit our values. It's very important. Okay, and remembering that the cast shadow here is just a darker area of that substrate that the sphere is standing on, right? So you want to handle it the same way, you just want to make it darker, right? And I'm following the direction, the dominant direction of the page. And so when we look at the sphere here, it also shows us, by going around the volume of the sphere, it shows us the descriptive dominant direction, you know, of your line work, right? So we're going around the object, and you can see how the dimension of the drawing is starting to appear nicely, right? And notice there's no outlining going on, and we're adding the values where they belong. This edge is going to be sharp. There's going to be a soft transition edge, a shadow core, the reflected light, and the cast shadow. And we can indicate a little bit on the cast shadow side to emphasize the visual here, right? And here you go. Okay.